Well, hiya. I am here now with my cousin, Douglas Burdett. I'm kidding. We are just sharing a surname, but it's lovely to be connected, and I appreciate that kinship, if you like. Douglas is the host of the Marketing Book podcast, and if you don't know it, you should be listening to it because it's brilliant. And he's agreed to come on and share some insights and thoughts about what he's seeing with companies and businesses and all the kind of reactions around COVID, etc., and what's happening in 2020. Welcome. Lovely to have you on.
Good to be here with another Burdett.
I know.
Not many people have that name, so maybe more in England.
We are a rarity.
Yes, that's right. Oh, stop it.
So yeah, social genius, social media genius. Kind of, you must know more about social media genius than nearly everybody because you've interviewed everybody. Everybody
Well,
has anything to say about it.
Yeah, I should know because the podcast, I appreciate knowing that you're a listener. It's been doing it about 5.5 years, and each week I publish an interview with the author of a new marketing or sales book. And I've read every single book, and today I published episode 284. And when I started the podcast, I didn't realize I was going to need to read each book. I'd already read the first 10.
I remember you saying that, and it didn't.
Yeah, and so, but it's been great, and it's been really enormously helpful. And I do it for personal reasons. I really love learning, and I'm excited to be able to talk to these authors. And the downside of reading all those books is that it has really cut into my scotch drinking. And you see, there's still scotch here. Normally, the bottle would be empty.
See, this is the Burdett thing. My dad was nuts about scotch.
Oh, well, it's genetic, so we are related.
Yeah.
And the gross domestic product of Scotland took a hit 5.5 years ago when I started this podcast, and I apologize to your Scottish audience members. But the same reason that some of the people might be tuning into the content you're producing is the same thing that was sort of troubling me and perplexing me when in mid-March in the US, we really went into serious lockdown, like so many places. And that's when I started this daily series where I was interviewing past authors who'd been on the show, and it was called Authors in Quarantine Getting Cocktails. And so I was basically, we were drinking for the most part. And but I was getting on, and it was so interesting to ask them what they thought. And so because we all kind of want to know what is going on, what's ahead for us, and what should we be thinking and doing. And so it's been really, really interesting for me to do that. And the listeners said it was very helpful. And the listeners were going through a lot of trauma. Some were losing their jobs and didn't quite know what to do. And I guess in my way, it was my way of trying to help out and kind of cope with what's going on. So that the things that you're exploring are, I'm sure, very appreciated by your audience.
I think it's anything we can do to help, isn't it? Because nobody wants businesses to go out of business at the end of the day.
No, and it's really satisfying to help other people. And there's nothing wrong with not knowing something. But if you can help others try to find out along with you, that's what I do on my show. Is I'm trying to help me and my listeners keep up with what's going on in this field. It's changing quite a bit.
It's a journey, isn't it? It's a journey to find out where we're going and how we get through this. And I think what I always take away from your interviews with authors is the depth of knowledge that the authors often have and how good you are at bringing that out. And also their worldview. Like you say, you get so many different views of it, if you like. We talked earlier about Philip Kotler, who Mark Schaefer talked about as well last week in his on his blog. And I mean, he is one of the big old men of marketing, gave us the marketing mix and all the rest of it.
He's the father of modern marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was talking about brands being vulnerable and not knowing and not always having all the answers. And you don't have to have all the answers. It's human to not have the answers.
and that's why he said that the more, particularly in this digital age, the more honest and vulnerable you can be, the more you can be yourself and not some slick corporation, uh, the more believable you are and the greater the trust. So
Mm,
that's why in this, COVID era, um, you certainly want to avoid trying to leverage COVID to market your products.
oh yeah.
Um, but also, you want to avoid making COVID about you, in terms of whether it's
Mm,
marketing, whatever, however, social media
mm,
or whatever. And I think, I know this sounds really simple, but it's very difficult for companies to do. And think about what messages you're sharing, and think about, first off, stop all your scheduled posts on social media. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be posting, but like we have a client where we had a lot of scheduled posts and we stopped them all and then just started sharing for them timely news, helpful updates for people. It was a business client, but they, not a consumer brand, but it, the silver lining from all of this might be that companies are finally realizing that they don't want to be tone deaf, and that people are in fact paying attention to them. And there was a book on the show called Utility, where marketing is now about help, not hype. And if you can be helpful and useful, this is by Jay Baer, great book, and that's really applied here. I spoke to an author who lives in London, an American, and he, Jason Miller, and he was talking about how this doesn't really change anything as it relates to marketing, because the same things that you should be doing now, you should have been doing in the past. Think about your audience. Don't treat social media like it's a one-way communication vehicle. Maybe use social media to listen more than you talk. And I think the companies that are successful now are the same ones that were successful in the past, in that they had the deepest understanding of their customers. They have deep insights, and those are always the most successful companies, is they just understand their customers better.
mm.
That's no different now, but it's just probably more important.
I think it's highlighted it, hasn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Brought it to the fore. The brands that are living their brand values, who understand their audience and are absolutely walking alongside them, are doing superbly. I mean, we've got a cobbler here called Timpson's. He's got the widest ranging reach of stores in pretty much every town. And he is so authentic. He looks after his staff. He looks after his customers. He has the most authentic brand voice. And that was the same before this, and it's just
Hmm.
become amplified through it. And then others, not so much. And it's just
Yeah.
all into stark relief.
Another thing that's come into great relief, or it's become very obvious, is the companies that are marketing and sending their messages through social media and so forth, the ones that have actions behind what they're saying are much more effective than those that are just saying, "We're here for you." It
Mm,
just seems sort of empty. Instead of saying, "We're here for you," do something, demonstrate that you're being helpful. I'll give you an example. Here in the United States, there's a national rental car company, and in the U.S., they tend not to rent to people under the age of 25 just because of insurance purposes. They're higher risk. Well, they knew that there were a lot of students still in college who needed to get home, and they weren't going to be able to catch flights. All the flights were being canceled. So they said, just come rent a car from us. You can be under 25. We're not going to charge you any more than we normally would. We want to get you home. And so, so that was a good example of just helping.
mm,
And maybe there was a higher risk to them, but they were helping people. And so there's so many examples of that, of companies just saying, well, rather than talking about ourselves, can we first think about how we might be able to help people? Like there's as you can imagine, I'm familiar with all the distilleries around here, and there's one here in Norfolk, and they make bourbon. And so all these breweries and distilleries in the US, they were able to make hand sanitizer very quickly.
Yeah, we
Part
have
of this,
one here a gin distillery here, right in Newbury, pivoted almost within a couple of weeks, and then making hand sanitizers. We're on the national television and everything. Great way of helping.
so these guys, like all the others, were making it, and then you couldn't go inside, but if you pulled up, there were certain days, not that I know exactly which days, but Tuesdays and Thursdays in the afternoon, you could pull up and they in your car and they sell you the bottle of bourbon, and then they include a bottle of their branded hand sanitizer. And you're helping somebody local, and but it was just an example where they're thinking, well, what can we do to help? You know, so there's many other examples of that, and I think there's been a lot less tone deafness in marketing and social media, and maybe because I'm an optimist, but also a lot more examples of companies that are letting their actions become their words in terms of doing something to help, which then gets amplified. And if you can get it amplified by others, it's even more effective, which is a good reason why you want to make
Yeah,
sure you build a community.
exactly. It makes you feel good. It makes your customers feel good. It's great for your reputation. It's a
Hmm.
win-win. I don't understand why companies wouldn't tread that path, basically.
Well, I think part of the reason, this is simply my theory, so in that book we talked about earlier, Marketing Rebellion by Mark Schaefer, he
Mm.
talks about a study by McKinsey from 10 or 12 years ago that showed that over 2/3 of everything said about a company, and this was 10 years ago, over 2/3 of everything that's said about a company is not said by the company anymore. And so that has wide-ranging implications for why businesses need to build a community and behave well and help people. But I still think there are a lot of people that think that they have a captive audience and that they can control the message. So there was a book on the show recently called The Context Marketing Revolution, written by Matthew Sweezy from Salesforce. Really interesting book. And in the book, he talked about something that happened in June of 2009, I believe, and they didn't realize it until afterwards. But that was the day that more content on the internet was created by individuals than by companies.
Wow.
And it's gone. The curve has become exponentially higher. And so I still talk to companies that think they have a captive audience and that what they say is going to be heard. And it's in that book, he talks about how that day in June 2009, before and after, before that, you could argue we were in an era of limited media. So we had captive audiences, and I used to be an ad guy in New York. It worked. There was a captive audience. We could run TV commercials, and it worked very well. And it was much more difficult to avoid those messages. Now we're in an era of limitless media. So unless a company has something that's interesting or helpful or educational or maybe entertaining, you're simply going to be invisible.
Mm. Yeah.
So these people, I still, I can remember talking to a dear client, but I remember him saying, well, we're ready to start that newsletter campaign you talked about. And it was based on sharing a lot of content that we'd produced for them that was really helpful for their customers. And they had delayed doing this. And I said, what do you have in mind? Or, I was trying to find out what they want. And he goes, well, we want to talk about ourselves and our services and the projects we've done. And, where do you start to explain that, his mom's not even interested in that? And we're competing with cat videos now. And so I think that some of the tone deafness probably comes from people that think that social media is a one-way communications channel rather than a conversation. I guess it's the word marketing is the problem. It was social media, but when they think of it as social media marketing, they think it's some sort of command and control channel by which we can shout at people. But the truth is, almost all of it goes to the digital landfill.
Yeah, because people just ignore it.
Hmm.
they don't just ignore it now. I think it was the insightful brands, or I can't quite remember. Anyway, there was a study, and they were meaningful brands. Meaningful brands found that most consumers wouldn't care if 77% of brands disappeared tonight.
Oh, I've heard, yes, that's been mentioned in some of the books. I'd
Yeah,
forgotten about that.
it's like,
Um,
why do you think you're unique? Most people don't care. You've got to find out what makes them care,
mhm.
and then give them what they are looking for. And most of the time they're looking for something a bit deeper than just a product. If they're going to connect with you, they want something that talks to their heart, that they
Mhm.
know that you share their values, and that they can rely on you, and that
And that
they,
they understand you. Yes.
it's
And they
really,
understand your problems and the transformations you're looking for. There was a terrific book on the show. Of course, there've been 284 terrific books, but
more people, but we'll take some cherry picking here.
yeah, but there was one called The Transformational Consumer by Tara Nicole Nelson, and it was so interesting. It was the only one like that where she explained, and it was beautifully written, she explained that every purchase someone makes, they're looking for some kind of transformation in their life, whether it's a pack of gum or a screwdriver or something. There's a transformation that's going on there, and you dig just a little bit, you might start to realize what it is they want. And that really got my attention. I still think about that book, and I often talk about that book when I give talks about some of the most important ideas from the first 275 books. So yesterday I did a talk for a group in Boston. It's all virtual now,
Uh-huh.
so
That's
they don't
nice,
have.
though. You don't have to leave the house. You can just,
Yes, I'd be
yeah.
happy to talk to your folks. And there was like the 5 ideas that matter most from the first 275 books, and it was mainly directed more at marketers because there was a talk I was going to give in Ohio that got canceled,
Mm.
and that was for a marketing conference. And so I kind of had that one prepared, but it talks about that, and I mentioned her book and a few of the others that illustrate some very specific points. And one of those 5 things that's so important, and it just keeps coming up over and over and over again, is, as I said before, the most successful companies are the ones that understand their customers.
Mm. Yeah, I think that is the key takeaway, isn't it? And I think that drives everything. It's when we're
It
looking at,
drives a lot of success for
yeah,
companies if they do
exactly.
understand.
Yeah. They say that most companies fail because they don't have an audience. They either haven't pitched their product or service correctly, or they haven't built a community, or they don't connect somehow,
Hmm.
and it kills them.
Well, and also sometimes it's just not a what they call a product market fit. And why is it usually not a product market fit? Because they don't understand the customer. This happens in Silicon Valley all the time, where or any kind of company that's driven largely by engineering people, they're fascinated by the technology, and it's the
Yeah.
same things that make them very successful inventors and engineers and so forth. But it's sort of a build it and they will come attitude rather than thinking, well, what is the problem that these people have? What is the friction in their lives?
Yeah.
So it's just kind of simple to explain, but it's somewhat counterintuitive. Empathy is the most important word in sales and marketing, I think, and it's really difficult for companies.
I think that's the biggest takeaway. Empathy is the most important word at the end of the day, isn't it? It's caring.
Well, and empathy is very often misunderstood when I'm talking to people. They think it's sympathy or compassion or pity, which it's not. It's simply understanding, putting yourself in their shoes, even if they're wrong.
Hmm.
There's one author that talked about this term called stempathy, where it's like stoicism and empathy, meaning don't judge them, just accept that's their belief.
Yeah. Walk a mile in their shoes. Just
Right,
done it.
right. Yeah. So yeah, that's why it keeps going back to that. So
Yeah. Hey, anyway, it's been an absolute pleasure. Will you,
yes,
we will share lots of links. So please, I will follow up on those book recommendations.
sure. And actually, for people that want to visit the website for the podcast. It's
Yeah.
marketingbookpodcast.com. But also for your audience, if I can save them from having to read 283 books, if there's one specific one that I think might help them, have them connect with me on LinkedIn. And because I hear from listeners every day from around the world, and it doesn't take much time. It's the most fun thing I get to do, where they'll say, can you recommend a book about this specific topic? And I go, yes, I know. Or I'll say, I don't know, but here's a resource for you. Again, it's fun helping. So if I can help somebody with any specific book recommendations for whatever their challenge is or what they want to learn more about, I love being able to do that and save them time. It's sort of a book prescription. That's what some of the listeners call it.
I love listening to your podcast because it saves me having to read all of them. Just summarize them so beautifully. It's a great little learning resource. Can't recommend highly enough.
Well, I appreciate that. I didn't realize that you were a listener. I think I need to up my game now. And I should start talking about you during the episodes. But I think that what's also helpful is that people get ideas from listening to it. I certainly do. I hope they benefit as much as I do. But they can listen to an interview and then help better decide if they want to buy the book and read it or not. So
I have certainly bought books after your podcast, and other times I just take away your content about it and I don't read it.
Or all the authors have blogs where you can go and learn more about them, and videos.
It's brilliant. So yes, I'm so happy you came on. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. I hope that everybody listening subscribes because it's brilliant. And I will.
And thank you for saying that I have wisdom. That's all I needed to hear. I don't hear that. No, I'm kidding.
Thank you.
I know, the more I learn, the more I realize I have so much more to learn.
Isn't it always the case, though?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. But that is a mark of wisdom, knowing how much you still have to learn.
Yes, but I think you could argue that if I were smarter, I wouldn't need to read so many books.
Thank you. Been an absolute pleasure. Talk soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.